It's 2:17 in the morning. Everyone else seems to be asleep. But you're awake, staring at the ceiling. Your phone is sitting beside you, screen turned down because you already know what's waiting on it. Another bill. Another message you don't want to open. Another reminder that something in your life still isn't where you thought it would be. And maybe you've been telling everybody, "I'm good." You say it at work. You say it to your family. You say it when somebody asks how things are going. "I'm good." But you know the truth. You're tired. Not just physically tired. Deep down tired. The kind of tired that sleep doesn't seem to fix. You've been carrying things you never talk about. Financial pressure. Family problems. A dream that isn't working out. A relationship that changed. A future that suddenly feels uncertain. And maybe the hardest part isn't even the problem. Maybe the hardest part is wondering, "God, do you still see me?" Because you've prayed. You really have. You've asked God for a way out. You've asked Him for strength. You've asked Him to open a door. And somehow, the door still looks closed. Maybe you've even wondered if you're being punished. Maybe you've wondered why somebody else seems to get opportunity after opportunity while you're fighting just to stay standing. And listen to me carefully. Your pain does not mean God has abandoned you. Your difficult season does not mean your story is over. And your current bank balance does not determine your worth. Your job title doesn't determine your worth. Your failures don't determine your worth. And neither does the opinion of people who walked away when life got difficult. You are still here. And sometimes that's where God begins. Not when everything is perfect. Not when you've figured everything out. Right here. In the middle of the mess. In the middle of the unanswered questions. In the middle of the night. Maybe you've been working harder than everybody realizes. You wake up. You work. You handle responsibilities. You come home exhausted. You try again tomorrow. And you keep telling yourself, "Just a little longer. Once I make more money, I'll finally breathe. Once I get that promotion, I'll finally feel successful. Once the business takes off, I'll finally be happy. Once everything is under control, then I'll have peace." But what if we've been taught the wrong definition of success? What if you can gain more money and still lose your peace? What if you can build a career and lose your family? What if you can become impressive to everybody else and completely unfamiliar to yourself? Jesus asked a question that still cuts through everything we chase. What does it profit a person to gain the whole world and lose their soul? That question isn't just for billionaires. It's for the exhausted person working overtime. It's for the young person desperate to prove themselves. It's for the parent trying to provide. It's for the entrepreneur staring at numbers late at night. It's for the person who keeps saying, "I'll rest later." We're living in a world that constantly tells us, more. More money. More followers. More recognition. More possessions. More achievements. More attention. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to grow. There's nothing wrong with working hard. There's nothing wrong with building something meaningful. But there's a dangerous moment when success becomes your identity. 'Cause then, every failure feels like death to your confidence. Every rejection feels personal. Every setback feels like proof that you're not enough. And you start living for applause from people who may not even know your name. You look at somebody else's highlight reel and compare it to your behind the scenes. You see their new house, their business, their vacation, their perfect-looking family, their success, and suddenly your own life feels small. But you don't know what happened after the camera stopped recording. You don't know what they cried about last night. You don't know what they're afraid of. You don't know what they're carrying. And you certainly don't know what God is doing in their life. So stop measuring your chapter against somebody else's chapter. God didn't ask you to become somebody else. He asked you to become faithful with what He placed in your hands. There is another lie we need to confront. The lie that says, If I just work hard enough, I can control everything. No, you can work hard. You should work hard. But you cannot control everything. You cannot control every opportunity. You cannot control every person's opinion. You cannot control every market. You cannot control tomorrow. You cannot control whether somebody stays. You cannot control every outcome. And when you try to carry responsibilities that belong to God, you eventually collapse under the weight. That's why surrender isn't weakness. Surrender means saying, Jesus, I'll do my part. But I refuse to pretend I'm God. I'll work. I'll learn. I'll prepare. I'll make wise decisions. I'll show up. I'll be disciplined. But I will not destroy myself trying to control what only you can control. And maybe that's the prayer somebody needs tonight. Not, Jesus, give me everything I want. But, Jesus, teach me how to trust you with what I cannot control. Because sometimes hardship doesn't just attack your finances. It attacks your identity. You start asking, what's wrong with me? Why can't I get ahead? Why does everything take so much effort? Why did God allow this? And those questions can become heavy. But here's something I want you to remember. A difficult season can reveal things that comfort never would, can show you who really matters, can expose what you've been depending on, can teach you patience, can force you to slow down, and sometimes can bring you back to Jesus. Not because Jesus enjoys watching you suffer, but because when everything you thought would hold you up begins to shake, you finally discover what can actually hold you. Think about Peter. Peter walked on water when his eyes were on Jesus. The moment he became overwhelmed by the storm, he started sinking. The storm didn't suddenly become stronger. His focus changed. And sometimes that's what happens to us. The bills become louder than our faith. The rejection becomes louder than God's promises. The fear becomes louder than prayer. The problem becomes bigger in our minds than the one we're trusting. So today, look up again. Not because the storm isn't real, but because Jesus is still greater than the storm. And let me tell you something about success. Real success isn't simply getting rich. Real success is becoming the kind of person who can carry what God puts into your hands without losing your soul. Because imagine getting everything you wanted and becoming someone you don't recognize. What good would that be? Imagine building a successful company, but losing your peace. Imagine earning more money, but becoming unavailable to the people you love. Imagine reaching your goal, but realizing you spent your entire life chasing somebody else's definition of winning. Jesus offers something deeper. He doesn't simply want to change your circumstances. He wants to change the person standing inside those circumstances. He wants to teach you wisdom, discipline, humility, courage, patience, self-control, compassion, faith. And those things matter because money can open doors, but character determines what happens after you walk through them. Maybe your breakthrough doesn't begin with a giant miracle. Maybe it begins with one small decision. Getting up, praying before touching your phone, opening scripture before opening social media, doing the work you've been avoiding, apologizing to somebody, learning the skill you've been putting off, creating a budget, walking away from something that's destroying your peace, asking for help, starting again. One faithful decision, then another, then another. That's how lives change. Not always in one dramatic moment. Sometimes quietly, sometimes painfully, sometimes so slowly that you don't notice the change until one day you look back and realize, I'm not who I used to be. But there's something even deeper. Because believing in Jesus doesn't mean life suddenly becomes easy. It means you don't have to face hard life alone. And in the next part, we're going to talk about what happens when you stop asking only, God, get me out of this, and start asking, God, what are you building in me while I'm here? But sometimes, The season you're begging God to end is also the season where He's preparing you for what you've been praying for. Because the question isn't simply, how do I become successful? The better question is, who do I become while I'm becoming successful? And in the next part, we're going to talk about surrender, not giving up, not quitting, surrendering the fear, the obsession, the need to control everything, and learning what it means to build a life with Jesus at the center. Because when Jesus becomes the foundation, success stops being about proving your worth, and it starts becoming about using your life for something that actually matters. Maybe you're asking yourself right now, what does surrender actually look like? Because let's be honest, the word surrender can sound like defeat, like giving up, like admitting you can't handle your life. But that's not what I'm talking about. Surrender isn't saying, Jesus, I don't care anymore. Saying, Jesus, I care deeply, but I trust you more than I trust my own understanding. That's different, very different, because there are things you can change, and there are things you cannot. You can change your habits. You can change your effort. You can change what you consume. You can change who you spend time with. You can learn. You can work. You can apologize. You can start again. But you cannot force every door open, and you cannot make everybody understand your heart. You cannot guarantee tomorrow. That's where faith begins to become real. Not when everything makes sense, but when it doesn't. Maybe you've done that. I know that feeling is familiar to a lot of people. You pray at night, God, I trust you. Then you wake up at 3 a.m. thinking about the same problem. But here's the truth. Having fear doesn't mean you don't have faith. Faith doesn't mean you never feel anxious. Faith means fear doesn't get the final word. You can be scared and still pray. You can be uncertain and still move forward. You can cry and still believe. You can have questions and still follow Jesus. Think about the disciples in the boat. The wind was strong. The water was rising. They were afraid, and Jesus was there. The presence of Jesus did not mean there was no storm. It meant they weren't facing the storm alone. That's important, because some of you have been waiting for Jesus to prove He's with you by making every problem disappear. But what if His presence is the miracle you haven't noticed? What if the strength you had yesterday wasn't yours alone? What if the fact that you got out of bed when you wanted to stay there was grace? What if the reason you haven't completely given up on your future is because God has been quietly holding you together? Maybe you're stronger than you think. Not because you're some superhero, but because you've been carried through things you thought would destroy you. And you're still here. Now here's where I want to make something very clear. Faith is not an excuse for laziness. Following Jesus does not mean sitting on the couch waiting for your life to magically change. No, faith should produce action. If you're praying for a job, apply. If you're praying for wisdom, learn. If you're praying for financial stability, start managing what you already have. If you're praying for a business, study your market, improve your skill, serve people well, make the phone call, send the email, build the product, try again. If you're asking God to help you become disciplined, then give Him something to work with. Get up, start, do the next right thing. You don't need to know every step. You need to take the next one. That's often how God leads us. Not with a giant map showing the next 10 years. Sometimes He gives you enough light for today, and you have to trust Him for tomorrow. There's another lesson that changed the way I think about success. Responsibility and control are not the same thing. You are responsible for your choices. You are not responsible for controlling every outcome. You're responsible for showing up. You're not responsible for making everyone applaud. You're responsible for being honest. You're not responsible for making everyone like you. You're responsible for working faithfully. You're not responsible for deciding exactly when the results arrive. That's God's territory. And when you understand that, you breathe differently, you work differently, you pray differently, because you stop treating every setback like a personal attack from heaven. Sometimes a closed door is simply a closed door. Sometimes rejection is redirection. Sometimes waiting is preparation. And sometimes the answer is simply, not yet. That phrase can be painful. But not yet is not the same as never. Think about a seed. For a while, nothing appears to happen. You look at the soil and see nothing. But underneath the surface, something is happening. Roots are forming. Growth is taking place where nobody can see it. And maybe that's your season. You keep praying. You keep working. You keep learning. You keep showing up. And you keep wondering, where is the result? But maybe God is working beneath the surface. Maybe He's building your character before He increases your platform. Maybe He's teaching you how to manage $100 before giving you $10,000. Maybe He's teaching you patience before giving you influence. Maybe He's teaching you humility before giving you authority. Because here's the thing nobody tells you about success. Getting the blessing is one thing. Carrying the blessing is another. A person can receive money and destroy themselves with it. Maybe you're wondering, okay, I believe in Jesus. I want to change. But what do I actually do now? Because faith isn't only something you feel. Faith has to become something you live. And if you've been broken by life, you don't rebuild everything in one day. You rebuild one decision at a time, one morning at a time, one prayer at a time, one disciplined choice at a time. So let's start with the place where every successful life begins. Your mind. Before your circumstances change, your thinking has to change. Because if you keep telling yourself, I can't, I'll never make it, I'm always going to struggle, nothing ever works for me, eventually you start living like those words are facts. But you have to challenge those thoughts. Not with fake positivity, not by pretending everything is perfect, but with truth. You can say, this season is hard, but it is not forever. I've made mistakes, but I can learn from them. I don't know how everything will work out, but I know I don't have to face it alone. Jesus is still with me. That is different. You're not denying the problem. You're refusing to let the problem become your identity. Now let's talk about discipline. Because we love talking about motivation. But motivation comes and goes. Some mornings you will feel inspired. Some mornings you won't. Some days you'll feel close to God. Other days you'll feel distracted. Some days you'll believe in your future. Other days you'll question everything. That's why you need discipline. Discipline says, I don't have to feel ready. I just have to do what needs to be done. If you want a better life, start respecting small commitments. Wake up when you said you would. Do the work you said you would do. Study when you said you would study. Pray when you said you would pray. Save what you said you would save. And when you fail, don't throw the entire plan away. Start again. You don't need perfection. You need consistency. And here's something important. Don't try to change 20 things tomorrow. Choose one. Maybe it's your morning routine. Maybe it's your spending. Maybe it's your screen time. Maybe it's your prayer life. Maybe it's your work ethic. Start with one thing, then build from there. Now let's talk about money. Because money matters. Bills are real. Food costs money. Housing costs money. Families need support. So I'm not going to tell you that money doesn't matter. It does. But money should be a tool, not your master. Learn how to manage what you already have. Know where your money goes. Stop spending just to impress people. Be careful about debt. Build useful skills. Look for honest ways to increase your income. And don't be ashamed of starting small. Everybody who builds something starts somewhere. Maybe your first goal isn't becoming rich. Maybe your first goal is simply becoming financially responsible. Then build from there. Learn, improve, work, save, give when you can, and stay humble. Because more money doesn't automatically create more wisdom. You need wisdom before you need more money. Now let's talk about work. Whatever you do it with integrity. You may not love your current job. You may not be where you want to be. But while you're there, learn something, build experience, develop skills, become dependable, become the person people can trust. If you want to become an entrepreneur, don't just chase money. Solve problems. Find something people genuinely need. Serve them well. Keep learning. Expect mistakes. And understand that failure doesn't automatically mean you're finished. Sometimes failure is simply information. Tells you what didn't work. Then you adjust. You learn. You try again. But don't let your ambition become an idol. Your business is not your identity. Your career is not your identity. Your success is not your identity. You belong to Jesus before you belong to any job title. And that changes everything. Because if you know who you are, you don't have to spend your entire life proving yourself. Now let's talk about relationships. Be careful who has access to your mind. The people around you influence what you believe is normal. If everybody around you is constantly negative, you'll eventually start thinking negativity is reality. If everybody around you celebrates irresponsibility, responsibility will start feeling strange. If everybody around you mocks your faith, you may slowly become embarrassed about what you believe. You need people who encourage you to become better. People who can tell you the truth. People who pray with you. People who don't disappear when life gets difficult. And you also need to become that person for somebody else. Don't only ask, "Who can help me?" Who can I help? Because sometimes God answers someone else's prayer through you. Maybe someone needs encouragement. Maybe someone needs forgiveness. Maybe someone needs a second chance. Maybe someone simply needs somebody to listen. Success without love is empty. Achievement without character is dangerous. And money without purpose can become a prison. So don't just build a bigger life. Build a better one. And now, I want you to think about your purpose. Why are you here? What has God placed inside you? Maybe you're a teacher. Maybe you're a business owner. Maybe you're a parent. Maybe you're a student. Maybe you're still figuring it out. That's okay. You don't need to have your entire future figured out today. Ask God for wisdom. Pay attention to your abilities. Pay attention to the problems you care about solving. Pay attention to the people you naturally want to help. And start there. Your purpose doesn't always arrive as one giant revelation. Sometimes it becomes clearer as you serve, as you learn, as you work, as you grow. And sometimes, the thing you thought was a setback becomes part of your preparation. The rejection teaches you resilience. The failure teaches you humility. The difficult season teaches you compassion. The waiting teaches you patience. And one day, you may look back and say, "Now I understand why I had to go through that." Maybe not every detail, maybe not every painful moment, but you'll understand that God was not finished with you. So if you're in a difficult season right now, don't quit simply because you can't see the ending. You can't see the entire picture from where you're standing, but God can. And here's what I want you to remember tonight. You don't need to become successful overnight. You need to become faithful today. Do today's work. Pray today's prayer. Make today's wise decision. Forgive what you can forgive. Learn what you need to learn. Save what you can save. Serve somebody. Take care of your mind. Take care of your relationships. And keep Jesus at the center. Then wake up tomorrow and do it again. That's how a life gets rebuilt. That's how confidence returns. That's how discipline grows. That's how trust becomes stronger. That's how broken people begin to stand again. And maybe you've been waiting for a huge miracle, when God has been inviting you into small obedience. Maybe the door you're praying for requires preparation first. Maybe the opportunity you're asking for requires a stronger version of you. Maybe the blessing you're praying for requires wisdom to carry it. So don't just pray, Jesus, change my circumstances. Also pray, Jesus, change me. Give me wisdom. Give me discipline. Give me patience. Give me courage. Give me humility. Teach me how to handle success without losing you. Teach me how to handle failure without losing myself. Teach me how to work hard without worshiping work. Teach me how to earn money without loving money more than you. Teach me how to lead without becoming arrogant. Teach me how to serve without needing applause. And when the time comes, help me use whatever you give me to bless somebody else, because that's true success. Not simply having more, but becoming more useful, more faithful, more loving, more disciplined, more courageous, more like the person Jesus is calling you to become. And if you're still watching right now, I want you to know something. You made it through another difficult day. Maybe nobody congratulated you. Maybe nobody noticed. But God sees you. He sees the tears nobody saw. He sees the work nobody appreciated. He sees the prayers you whispered when you didn't know what else to say. He sees you trying. And your story is not finished. So if this message reached you at the right moment, stay connected. Subscribe and become part of this family. Not because we're promising you an easy life, but because we're choosing to keep our eyes on Jesus through the hard days and the good ones, because you don't have to walk alone. And now, before we finish, I want to pray for you. I pray for the person listening right now. You know what they're carrying. You know the bills they're worried about. You know the dreams they're afraid to talk about. You know the mistakes they regret. You know the nights when they wondered if anything would ever change. Lord, remind them that they are not forgotten. Give them strength for today. Give them wisdom for tomorrow. Give them courage to take the next step. Help them stop comparing their life to somebody else's. Help them stop measuring their worth by money, success, followers, or approval. Teach them to find their identity in you. Bless the work of their hands. Give them wisdom with money. Give them discipline with their time. Give them peace in their mind. Give them healthy relationships. Give them courage to walk away from what is hurting them. And give them strength to pursue what is good. If they have failed, give them grace to begin again. If they are tired, give them rest.